Did you know the ancient world had killers who moved through guarded streets with nothing but a hidden blade and a plan, then flipped an empire in under a minute? No armies, no battles, just one step too close, one fast strike, and power changing hands before anyone even knows what they saw. Today, I'm revealing the top 10 deadliest ancient assassins in history. Lone professionals, organized networks, and missions so bold that even the failures scared rulers into panic. And number one is the reason the word assassin still hits the same way today. This is Eternal Legends, where the past stays alive and the names that shaped it never fade. Subscribe and lock in. We're counting down from number 10 to number 1. If you want to understand ancient assassinations, start with one harsh fact. The safest looking places are often the easiest places to kill from. Palaces are full of guards, rituals, and rules, but they are also full of servants, food, medicine, and constant private access. If you can move inside that system without raising suspicion, you are already more dangerous than a soldier outside the gates. Bagoas was a court insider in the Achaemenid Persian world, in a place where power did not just sit on a throne. Power moved through rooms, through people, through permissions. That matters because assassins who work from inside do not need to force entry. They get invited in, they get trusted, they get waved through. Bagoas is linked by later historical tradition to the poisoning of King Artaxerxes III. Poison is a different category of killing because it is not only an act of violence, it is also an act of confusion. Nobody hears the strike, nobody sees the attacker. The victim declines in a way that can be blamed on sickness, age, stress, or the gods. And while the victim weakens, everyone around the throne starts calculating outcomes. That is why palace poisoners are remembered even when battlefield killers are forgotten. A battlefield death is expected. A palace death creates paranoia. It forces the court to look inward, not outward. Suddenly the enemy is not at the border, the enemy is at the table. The most dangerous part is that poison does not require physical dominance. A strong guard can still be poisoned. A brilliant commander can still be poisoned. A king who controls an empire can still be poisoned if the wrong person controls his cup, his medicine, or the timing of his meals. Bagoas represents the cleanest example of assassination as court management. A court figure who can remove the ruler has leverage over everyone else. Even the rumor of that power changes how people behave. People become careful around him. People become compliant. People stop speaking openly. Now we move into the Warring States period of ancient China, a time where rulers lived with constant threat because coups and betrayals were normal, not rare. In that environment, security gets tight, and tight security creates habits. Guards become predictable. Protocol becomes routine. That routine creates blind spots. Zhuan Zhu is remembered as the assassin who weaponized normalcy. Instead of sneaking in at night, he used a social setting, the kind of setting where people lower their guard because etiquette takes over. If you can hide your attack inside a moment that everyone expects to be harmless, you have an advantage that a warrior in armor does not have. The famous detail in the story is a dagger concealed inside a fish served at a banquet. Whether every later retelling keeps the exact same object does not change what makes the assassination method deadly. It is the idea of hiding the weapon in something that passes inspection without suspicion. Food is handled by trusted staff. Food is carried openly. Food is not treated as a threat until it is too late. This is also a close-range kill, and close-range kills are the hardest to stop once the attacker is in the room. At arm's length, the target has almost no time to react. The guard might be 2 steps away, and that still might not matter. The first seconds are owned by the attacker. Ancient rulers depended on layers: servants, stewards, cooks, attendants, messengers. Those layers made power possible, but they also created vulnerability. Zhuan Zhu exploited that vulnerability. He did not need to defeat the guards in combat, he needed to bypass the guards' assumptions. Jing Ke is one of the most famous assassins in Chinese historical memory, and what makes him terrifying is not just the act itself, but the target. He went after the king of Qin, the man who would become Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. That is a target with guards, intelligence networks, and a court that expects betrayal. The goal was not a personal grievance, the goal was political survival. Qin's expansion threatened the existence of rival states. When a single power starts swallowing everyone else, other rulers eventually face a choice: submit, fight openly, or attempt to cut the head off the project before it becomes unstoppable. Jing Ke was sent to do that last option. The plan relied on access. That is always the heart of assassination. Jing Ke carried gifts meant to earn a private audience. Accounts describe a map presented in a ceremonial way, concealing a weapon meant for the moment the target leaned in. That detail matters because it shows how assassins create a reason for proximity. You cannot strike from across the room with a short blade. You must get within reach without being stopped. The attempt failed, and that failure is part of why the story is so famous. It becomes a lesson in how small mistakes matter at close range. If the weapon sticks, if the grip slips, if the target moves at the wrong second, if the guards react faster than expected, in an assassination the margin is thin, and once the moment is gone, it is gone. But even a failed assassination can be historically deadly. Here is why. The attack proved the ruler was physically reachable. It forced the court to harden its procedures. It likely expanded paranoia and punishment. It made the state more severe. That is a ripple effect that changes real lives. Jing Ke sits at number 8 because the attempt became a landmark warning. Even the most guarded leader in a rising superpower can be forced into panic at blade range. Whether the strike lands or not, that moment shakes the foundation of power. Now we move to Athens, where assassination becomes something else entirely. A public political act that gets turned into a civic legend. Harmodius and Aristogiton attacked a ruling figure during a public festival. That is important because public settings create a different kind of fear. A palace kill scares elites. A festival kill scares everyone. The practical challenge here is obvious. Crowds mean witnesses, confusion, and short windows. Crowds also mean concealment. In a dense public event, an assassin can approach the target without looking unusual. Everyone is armed with plausible excuses: a gift, a ritual object, a garment that hides the hand. Security is busy scanning the crowd instead of watching individual faces. Their action became known as tyrannicide, and Athens later treated the story as a founding myth for political freedom. That framing is the dangerous part. Once a society celebrates assassination as a virtue in certain circumstances, it creates a precedent. Future killers can claim they are not murderers. They can claim they are patriots. That story can be true or false, but once it becomes socially usable, it becomes a weapon. From a pure assassination standpoint, their story matters because it shows that even without elite access, a motivated attacker can strike in a public moment where attention is scattered and movement is constant. It also shows the price. Even when the killers become symbols, the immediate reality is often death, capture, or brutal retaliation. This entry also forces a reality check. People love to imagine that political assassination ends tyranny cleanly. It rarely does. More often it creates instability, revenge cycles, and power struggles. Now we move into organized assassination as a sustained tactic. The Sicarii operated in Roman-era Judea, and they are associated with the use of a small dagger called a sica. That weapon choice is not a detail for trivia. It is a design choice for a specific environment: tight spaces, quick strikes, and fast disappearance. The Sicarii did not fight conventional battles as their primary identity. They targeted individuals, often people seen as collaborators or enemies, and they did it in public spaces where confusion and density protected the attacker. Markets, festivals, crowded streets, places where you can be close to someone without standing out. This is what makes them deadly. They use the crowd not only as cover, but as a multiplier. When a killing happens in a crowd, nobody knows what they saw. Witnesses disagree. People panic. Some freeze, some run. Guards move toward the wrong person. In the first seconds, the attacker has a chance to vanish simply by moving with everyone else. Public stabbing also creates a specific psychological effect. It makes everyday life feel unsafe in a way military occupation alone cannot achieve. Occupation is visible and predictable. A hidden blade is invisible and unpredictable. People start avoiding gatherings, people start whispering, people start suspecting neighbors. The social pressure can be as powerful as physical violence. The Sicarii are number 6 because they show assassination as street-level control. You do not need to kill thousands. You need to kill a few in the right places at the right times, so everyone else adjusts behavior out of fear. That is what turns a dagger into a political tool. If you want to see how an emperor can be removed without an invading army, look at the assassination of Caligula. Caligula ruled with a reputation for cruelty, humiliation, and unpredictable behavior. Rulers like that create enemies everywhere because fear does not build loyalty. It builds resentment, and resentment looks for an opening. Cassius Chaerea was a Roman officer positioned close enough to know routines and close enough to act. That is the most dangerous profile in any security system. An insider with legitimate access. When you are guarding someone, you stop being watched as a threat. You become part of the environment. That is exactly what an assassin wants. The killing took place in a setting where movement and transition created opportunity. That matters because security is strongest during planned formal moments and weakest during transitions. Doors opening, hallways, private corridors, moments after public events, moments when everyone thinks the important part is over. That is when people relax. That is when the attacker strikes. The assassination was not only a personal removal, it was a political earthquake. When an emperor is killed by people within his own protective system, it tells the entire empire that the throne is not protected by destiny, it is protected by humans, and humans can decide they are finished. That changes the behavior of senators, generals, and the next man who takes the throne. It also changes security culture. After a killing like this, rulers do not only add guards, they start reshaping access. They begin testing loyalty. They begin punishing on suspicion. They begin narrowing the space around themselves. That tends to make them even more isolated, which can make them even more paranoid, which can make them even more hated. Pausanias assassinated Philip II of Macedon, and the reason this matters is simple. Philip was not a minor ruler. He built Macedon into the foundation for future conquest. He reorganized the army, reshaped the state, and positioned Macedon to dominate Greece and beyond. Killing him was not just killing a man, it was cutting into a historical machine while it was still running. The assassination happened during a public event, which is one of the most dangerous times for any leader. Public events require visibility. Visibility reduces security flexibility. A ruler cannot hide behind layers of protection and still be seen by the crowd. That creates openings, especially for someone who can approach under the cover of ceremony and movement. Pausanias is also a reminder that motives in ancient assassination are often contested. Personal grievance, political manipulation, and court intrigue can overlap. People argue details because the sources are messy, but motive debates do not change the practical reality. An assassin found a moment where the king was exposed enough for a blade to land. From a technical standpoint, this is a classic public strike. Fast approach, fast kill, chaos, and immediate pursuit. Even if the assassin dies seconds later, the mission has already succeeded because the target is down. In political assassination, survival is optional. Impact is the objective. Pausanias is number 4 because his blade did not only end a reign, it altered the succession of one of the most consequential states in ancient history, and the ripple effect reached far beyond Macedon's borders. This entry is not one man. It is an institution that turned proximity into power. The Praetorian Guard began as elite protection for Roman leaders. That sounds noble on paper. In practice, it created a group of armed professionals who lived near the emperor, controlled access to him, and had the force to decide what happened in the palace when politics turned ugly. If you are guarded by ordinary soldiers far away, you can keep them at a distance. If you are guarded by an elite unit that stands next to you every day, you are dependent on their loyalty for every breath you take. That dependence is leverage. Leverage becomes political power. Political power becomes a reason to remove leaders who threaten the unit's privileges. The Praetorians became known for influencing succession and in some cases directly participating in the removal of emperors. Sometimes the removal was a direct killing. Sometimes it was enabling a killing by refusing protection at the key moment. Sometimes it was a coordinated decision that ended with a body on the floor and a new name on the throne. This is why they belong in a list about assassination. Assassination is not only a lone killer with a dagger. Assassination is also structured access and the ability to decide who lives long enough to rule. In that sense, the Praetorian Guard functioned as a system capable of lethal outcomes whenever it chose. This is the assassination people think they already understand, but most summaries flatten it into a slogan. The real reason it belongs near the top is that it shows how killing becomes easier when it is shared. A single assassin can lose his nerve. A group builds momentum that becomes almost impossible to stop once the first strike happens. Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus were not outsiders. They were part of Rome's political class. That insider status is what made the assassination possible. If an unknown man walked towards Caesar with a concealed blade, guards would stop him. When respected senators approach, the assumptions change. The room treats them as normal. That normality is the opening. The setting matters too. The Senate environment was not built for personal security in the modern sense. It was built for political performance and legitimacy. Caesar, despite the danger around him, still moved through spaces where he had to appear confident. A ruler who hides too much looks weak. And weakness in Roman politics invites more threats. That pressure forces leaders to accept risk. The conspirators chose a moment where the target could be surrounded. Surrounding matters. It compresses reaction time. It limits escape routes. It creates confusion. It also distributes blame. When many blades strike, it becomes harder to assign one killer as the entire story. That can be useful to conspirators who want to frame the act as a collective political statement rather than an individual crime. Here's the strict reality check that people avoid. Assassination does not guarantee the political outcome the assassins claim they want. Brutus and Cassius did not create stability. They created a vacuum. A vacuum in a violent political culture gets filled by force. The result was civil conflict and the eventual rise of imperial rule anyway. So why are they number 2 if the outcome was not what they wanted? Because in the moment, they proved something terrifying. They proved that a leader who had effectively become the center of Roman power could be cut down by a coordinated group within his own political circle. That is a kind of vulnerability that cannot be fully fixed. You can punish conspirators after the fact. You cannot undo the demonstration that it was possible. Brutus and Cassius sit at number 2 because their assassination is the clearest example of elite access killing. It was not a random attack, it was a planned elimination inside the highest level of the state, executed by men who belonged in the room using the trust of the room against the target. At number 1, we reach the group that turned assassination into an identity so strong that the word still echoes through history, the Nizari Isma'ilis. Linked in later tradition to the term assassins, used targeted killing as a strategic tool in a world packed with rival powers, shifting alliances, and constant conflict. Before we go further, here is the honest line that has to be said. Historians debate details about the origin of the word and the way stories were exaggerated by enemies, especially in later European retellings. That does not erase what matters for this list. What matters is that this group developed a reputation for selective political killing that forced powerful leaders to change behavior. Reputation is part of the weapon. Their operations were not based on large battles. They were based on careful targeting. That means intelligence gathering, understanding routines, understanding who controls access, and then placing an operative close enough to end the target with a short blade. Short blades are important here because they are quiet and reliable at close range. No loud setup, no complex equipment, just proximity and certainty. A major part of their legend is tied to Alamut Castle in Persia, a stronghold associated with the movement's leadership. Whether every dramatic story about training and absolute loyalty is perfect or not, the strategic reality is clear. They operated in a way that made political enemies feel unsafe, even in fortified environments. The moment you can be killed in your own safe space, your entire concept of governance shifts. This is where unstoppable becomes practical rather than dramatic. An unstoppable assassin is not someone who cannot be killed. An unstoppable assassin is someone who changes the target's world, even when the assassin does not strike. Leaders restrict travel. Leaders isolate themselves. Leaders distrust advisors. Leaders punish suspected disloyalty. Leaders spend resources on security that could have gone elsewhere. The group wins before the blade even comes out because the fear forces political mistakes. Another reason they sit at number 1 is the system aspect. Individuals die. Systems persist. A movement with methods can continue operating across years, adapting to new targets and new conditions. Even if the enemy defeats one cell, the idea remains. If the reputation remains, the strategic leverage remains. They also highlight a grim truth about deterrence. Many political systems rely on punishment to prevent attacks. Punishment does not work well on operatives who accept death as part of the mission. If a man expects to die, prison is not a threat, torture is not a threat, confiscation is not a threat. That forces the target into an expensive defensive posture that still cannot eliminate risk completely. The Nizari Isma'ilis sit at number 1 because they represent the full maturation of assassination as a political instrument. Selective killing, operational discipline, psychological impact, and a reputation strong enough to shape decisions far beyond any single act. They are the reason the world still uses a version of their name when it talks about professional political murder. So that's the countdown, 10 stories where the ancient world shows its real face. Not only armies and walls, but schedules, access, crowds, food, corridors, and fear. Some of these assassins killed with poison. Some killed with a blade at arm's length. Some built systems that made power itself feel unsafe. Now I want your honest call, who belongs on this list that I left out? And if you judge by impact alone, not fame, who is your number 1? Drop it in the comments. I read them, and I use them. If you want another countdown with the same energy, I can do top 10 deadliest ancient spies, top 10 most feared bodyguards, or top 10 betrayals that collapsed empires. Like the video, subscribe to Eternal Legends, and I'll see you in the next one.